We're going wheel-to-wheel, door-to-door racing with this Civic this year. And so far, we've gone through the car to make sure that everything is running right, fixed, and safe. And we've tested it at VIR quite successfully, I might add. So now we're ready to throw on some modifications to this car to make it fit into its wheel-to-wheel class a little bit better. But there's something major that I've been putting off, something that I wasn't allowed to do in my previous class. But now that I'm going to GLTC, I'm allowed. I'm gonna tub the front end of this car to get it lower. There's a couple of reasons why I want to lower this car. It's not just aesthetics like it would be on most street cars. There's actually a lot of function, although I do have quite a lot of wheel gap and that bothers me. I think aesthetically it'll look a lot nicer. But the biggest thing is the airflow underneath the car. You want it to have a little bit of a natural rake so that it has some natural downforce underneath the car. The body of the car is gonna be creating a little bit of a Venturi effect, sucking the car down. It gives it a very small amount of downforce, but it gives it some, and that helps performance, which is good. Also, another reason, the footprint on the front of this car is absolutely massive. It looks huge. It is kind of huge for a Civic. It's got the wide body front end. It's wider and also taller because of all the splitter and everything. So we need to slim that up, which might help reduce some drag. And in order to do that, we're gonna tub the front end, which means we're gonna cut out the wheel wells in the engine bay so that the wheels can come up. Right now, I can't make this car any lower than it currently is because the wheels actually contact the wheel wells in here. There's actually rub marks I have to repaint over there every now and then from the tire contacting the wheel wells. So we're gonna cut these sections out in front and behind the strut towers and weld in some new metal so that the tire can come up higher. But also, because of that, we need to make sure the axle angle is correct, which means we need to raise the motor up. But also the oil pan sits so low, we wanna raise the motor up so it doesn't hit curbing as well. So we're gonna raise the motor up about an inch in order to lower the car about an inch. And that also means we need to raise the splitter up about an inch because the splitter would be dragging on the ground otherwise. This is as low as the splitter can go with the suspension travel. Under braking, it actually does contact the track a little bit, so that is minimum height for the splitter, which means we need to make a new splitter, mount it about an inch higher, raise the engine an inch higher, tub the frame. We got our work cut out for us. Look at this thing. This is trusty splitter. 2 seasons. You can see where I have my cutout for the oil pan and it still kind of rubs, but we did this super thick because we needed the extra weight, but it being so thick is actually causing issues as far as clearance of the oil pan to the ground. So that's why we had this little cutout here, but we're gonna go a little bit thinner with our new splitter, which will shave a little bit of weight, which we don't need to do, but mostly just kind of get that footprint thinner so that we can get the car lower. Okay, we're gonna jack up the motor, take off the front 2 motor mounts, leave the rear one on there, kind of use it as a pivot, and then hopefully get this thing raised. Okay, so now that we have the motor up on its upper mount, I think it's pretty obvious. It's probably not obvious to you watching in a video, but in person, this motor, it seems like it's jumping out at me. It's sitting almost above the fender line, which is not great. I hope I don't have to cowl the hood, but I do have to notch the hood. You'll already notice that there's a couple notches in the hood, and that's because I had to clear for certain things like the power steering pump that was here and the map sensor. Well, now I've got to clear it a little bit more because it's hitting the valve cover and also the intake manifold, so we're gonna have to hack up the hood a little bit, which is unfortunate. It is a carbon hood, but I have 3 points of contact for the hood. I have the regular latch and then I have the 2 latches on the side. So even if the hood is a little bit floppy, it should still stay put. Okay, now that we have the hood cleared up top, it's time to go underneath and bring everything up 1 inch, which means making new rear mounts for the splitter here, moving these middle mounts up, and making our splitter rods a little bit shorter, and also we've got to make a new splitter because this one has been through 2 seasons. It's very old. It's actually starting to bow a little bit, and it's chipping on the corners, and we also need to clearance the oil pan a little bit more if we're going to have the splitter mount higher. So this splitter is 3/4 of an inch thick. We're going to make a new one that's a 1/2 inch thick, which gives us 1/4 inch of clearance right off the bat.
But before we can make the splitter, I have to make some new rear brackets.
All right, we have our template for both sides, and we're actually going with a little bit of a thicker metal. You'll notice it's a little bit wider than what I had in there previously. So that should give it actually a little bit more strength and support. But then once I bend it for that L shape there, I'm also going to weld on a rib on the back side of it that should provide support so that it doesn't kind of bend back like this one did. Devontae, you know what's crazy? We had, you know, a couple 100,000 views on these videos. I didn't realize there were that many fabricators out there. I saw in the comments of the first episode, we have a lot of fabricators in our audience. I mean, everybody's telling me what I'm doing wrong. It's pretty cool. All right, that's how much shorter we're going. Basically the thickness of the old splitter is how high up we're going. That feels so short. I'm really worried about that clearing the oil pan, but gotta do what you gotta do. Version 1.0 of the F bracket turned into L bracket because it didn't actually, yeah, but there we go. Much fatter, support on the back, rounded front edge so you don't hit your freaking head, and that's very hot still because I was just grinding on it. But yeah, hopefully this one holds up a lot better. Doesn't even have to. I mean, this one held up for 2 years. That's plenty. Who knows where this car is going to be 2 years from now. Okay, so it looks like the old splitter actually fits the new setup. We're still gonna make a new one because we need it to be thinner. And there's a couple things that have to be changed to improve on it. But it's actually surprising, it does clear the oil pan, which is pretty impressive. Looks like the skirt, or whatever you wanna call this, does hit the bumper now since it's up much higher. And I can also cut this down because now you can see a huge gap between this, I don't know what you want to call that, the air dam, I think that's what it's called, and the bumper. So we can cut this almost in half, maybe even less. I think the air dam is not the most attractive looking, so we'll thin that down a little bit. I'm also missing a little bit of the air dam here. This piece actually broke off. You'll probably notice it in a lot of the footage, this like chunk missing. Drives me nuts. So now we've got to take off these titanium pucks. They have 4 of these underneath the splitter. They're actually held in with titanium dress-up bolts. And these are titanium pucks. They're called skid pucks by Professional Awesome. If you hit the pavement with just the splitter without these pucks, it'll air pocket, and that will essentially get rid of any downforce that you had because no air can flow underneath it anymore, which means you're creating no suction and you're not getting any downforce. So these hit the ground first so that there's still some air underneath. That's why they're somewhat thick. So air can still flow underneath and you're still getting downforce. You're still getting a little bit of that suction. So these are super important. I have 4 of them because it's kind of a big splitter and it hits in different spots depending on where you are on the track. So, but they're pretty hidden. Like they mount pretty flush. They sit recessed in there. That way airflow can go smoothly over top of this. I didn't want to disturb the airflow. So I just like kind of drilled in like a recessed pocket in there, and that's how they sit. All right, now that we've got the splitter cut out, it is time to put on all the hardware. We have the professional awesome quick release mounts, we have some splitter mounts, and we have some bracing that we need to put on. And all of this might be a little bit boring for you because you are an avid viewer of Gears and Gasoline. You've already seen me build the first splitter, and if you haven't, you can check it out in the video right there. So I'm just gonna kind of blaze past this in the video and just kind of assemble this because I've got to get moving. I'm on a somewhat tight timeline, and I've got to get tubbing this car before it's too late.
I picked up some fiberglass and resin from Advanced Auto Parts to seal up the bottom of the splitter and to add a little bit more rigidity.
All right, now we've got the car completely slammed, as you can tell. It looks pretty cool like this, but I took the spring out of the coilover. I adjusted it down 1 inch, ride height wise, and then took the spring out and compressed it all the way up. So this is essentially how high the tire will be when you hit a bump or curbing or something like that on the track. At full compression, the most it'll go is this ride height. And good news, the wheel moves, which means it's not binding on anything. The bad news is when I turn the wheel, it doesn't move, meaning it's contacting inside the wheel well, behind and up front. So now we have to mark where it's contacting and start cutting. So looking in the wheel well here, it's got some contact right there. You can see the rub marks. I've marked where else it's contacting with a Sharpie, a gold colored Sharpie you can see there, and also over there. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take an air hammer to this spot and this spot, because that's actually the frame rail. So I just have to push the frame rail in there. Tubbing wouldn't really help that, but this spot right here, if I tubbed this section, that would definitely help there. I could do that for the rear as well and tub that, but I think it's pretty close on that side. So I'm gonna see if an air hammer will do the job first before, cutting it up. Air hammer is still gonna do a lot of damage, but less damage than cutting it out will do. And then we might still have to cut out this one because this one's contacting pretty early. But let's go ahead and get the air hammer out and see what we can do. There we go, we are fully compressed. Wheel is turned all the way to the right. Clearance. Not a single thing is hitting. It's really close, but not a single thing is hitting. That's fully compressed with the bump stop compressed. So this is like absolute worst case. I don't know what scenario you would have a fully compressed wheel while you're full steering lock, but things happen, and I wanna make sure I have the clearance for it, and I do now. You have no idea how painful that was. I've been waiting to do this for 2 years. Okay, now that we have the wheel well cut out and the tire clearance, you might be wondering to yourself, are you gonna leave a huge hole in that engine bay? Well, of course not. We're gonna weld some metal in. And guess where I got that metal? A trailer fender. It's the right curvature for this wheel. It's actually slightly bigger than the curvature, which is good because that covers for when it's turning. And we're just gonna hack this up, fit the right size metal that fits into that wheel well, and then weld it in. Trailer fenders. I got this idea from Eric Catil, so I'm not taking credit for it. It was all Eric Catil's idea. He did it first on his EG, and now I'm gonna do it on the EK. Okay, we've got the tub in place, we've got it welded in. We do need to add sealant to it and then paint it. But before we do that, we've checked clearance. The tire clears everything. However, at full compression, the control arm hits the strut cap, the strut tower. I don't know what you want to call this. If you remember on the Stance road trip with the TSX, which was also slammed.
But check this out.
I got the BC Extreme Low coilovers. The previous owner of that car had just cut out a hole in the top strut tower, which is not advised. Structurally speaking, it's not strong. So we have a better solution to clear the upper control arms, and that is these little plates. These are strut tower caps. They weld in place and they go right there, and that gives me extra clearance, but also gives me extra support. And the downside is that these are too strong. Just like the tubs, I had a really hard time welding these in because the factory chassis metal is so much thinner than the metal that we're using here. This is about the same thickness as the fender metal, and this was not fun to weld in. So I've called up my friend Andrew Hicks, who's gonna come by with a MIG welder because I only have a TIG welder. And he's gonna MIG this on here, which makes it a lot easier to weld different thickness metals together. It might not look quite as pretty, but that's okay. You can actually see on the strut cap right here, the upper control arm has already hit the metal, and it's hitting right there from, I wasn't even that low, and now I'm gonna go an inch lower. So we need to make sure that the strut tower clears, a lot higher than that. It's on both sides, so. More confirmation that I was already as low as I could go before. We had to cut up the chassis to go lower. It'll be worth it.
All right, so for this, we are working with body panels. It's a lot easier to MIG on body panels because they're thinner. Body sheet metal modification, it's a lot easier to MIG due to the thickness. It's a very, very thin metal. And then on the flip side, it is a little bit easier and faster from a production standpoint. Ben didn't know how to MIG, so he called me over.
Well, that only got us 0.2 degrees. Not really anything. Sometimes in these builds, you might be urged to comment below telling me about something that I'm doing wrong. I'm aware of this. I know that I'm not very intelligent. So much so that I just realized I could be putting this plastic sheet over the engine bay this entire time and keeping all of these metal shavings out from all of this other stuff. But I am too dumb to have realized that earlier. So I had Steve come by and he put some seam sealer over all of the seams for two reasons. One, to kind of cover up the welds because we MIG welded it. It's not the most attractive, but also if there were any pinhole leaks in there, which is pretty easy to have happen with MIG, it's all sealed up. So now no water is going to be transporting between the engine bay and the wheel well and all that. So it's all basically to OEM spec, which is nice, but now we got to paint it. I'm going to start off with some filler primer, then I'm going to paint it with white, then I'm going to paint it with championship white that I got at Advanced Auto Parts, pre-mixed in one little spray can. It's so cool that they do that. Well, there we have it. I have slammed my Civic. I've stanced my Civic, whatever you want to call it. This was probably one of the most involving build videos that we've done, even though it might not seem like it. There's about 120 hours of labor put into tubbing the front end of this car. And I'm tired. I'll be honest, I'm very tired. We still have a bunch more stuff to do to this car to get it homologated for GLTC class. A lot of that is safety requirements, window net, fire suppression, and that sort of thing. I might just do that off camera for the sake of just trying to get it done. So yeah, now we're one step closer for having this car GLTC ready to go door to door with some other cars. We've still got to do some fire suppression, window net, some safety stuff, and we've also got to detune the engine just a little bit. But maybe most importantly, we're gonna give this car a new livery.